Hello, friends and neighbors. This is DJ's Album Share, and I'm your host, DJ Roller. And we're back for another week 3, episode 3. Hope you guys are excited as I am about this episode. On this show, we have Max B, and we are listening to Phish, Rift, and Gov't Mule Dose. Those are two albums we're talking about. A couple of jam bands this week. There's a lot of negative connotation behind Phish, and we kind of addressed that right off. And honestly, dude, there's something to be learned from every other musician as an artist. You know, taking the time to appreciate why someone else is great is it's not easy. It's a lot of fun though. So some of you may know my buddy Max from the bass player of the Lovely Losers, and he's played at a couple different projects in town. But if you wanted to go support Max and give him a follow on his YouTube pages, it's the Lovely Losers on YouTube and me MI Max. You can follow along with both of those. Max also does some booking and promotion for Blackheath Meadery, so he's got a lot of things going on that are beneficial to the music industry as a whole here in Richmond, Virginia. So really great friend of mine, really awesome dude, really interesting conversation. I'm so glad we got to sit down and talk about these two albums. Really quick before we get into the episode, if you are enjoying the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred platform. We are on Apple Podcasts now, Spotify now. I do have the YouTube videos I'm still putting up every week, but until we advance this any further, my main focus is just getting you guys to rate and review, subscribe. And I appreciate all the support. I've heard a lot of positive feedback, and I appreciate it. But just need you guys to follow along with us so you can keep up on the new episodes. We got a lot of cool guests coming in the next couple of weeks. But without any more further ado, let's talk about some Phish and Gov't Mule. See you next week. What's up, Max? How you doing, brother?
Hey, doing well.
Well, this evening we are listening to a Phish album. Dun dun dun.
Controversial.
Yeah, right? I know what everybody's probably thinking, and you should just shut the fuck up and get over it. Because to me, I listened to the album as a whole today, right? As a whole setting. They do a really good job of one of the points I've been bringing up for the point of this podcast, listening to an album as a whole, right? The whole piece of art, like that was something that I really appreciated listening to it. The cool thing about Phish is like they drop into these riffs and these grooves for a minute and then come back out of it within the same song. In that, like,
yeah, exactly.
It kind of doesn't like they basically like, oh, what are the rules? Cool, fuck that. We're gonna do what we want.
Yeah,
you know. And you have to respect that. And then the biggest thing for me, listening to it, is it's like they have successfully combined most genres of music into like one, or at least in that time period.
Yeah.
The one representation of that that I had, the first one was "Fast Enough for You" with the steel guitar and
right.
on the beginning, the little steel guitar in the beginning. It was like this could be a country song
for sure.
You know.
The first song has bluegrass influence, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
The first song, Rift, is the name of the album, and the bass line is just 1-5, all the time, and it very fast, and it's very bluegrass, but it's also very not bluegrass. I don't know.
Right, yeah. Well, that's the cool thing. That's what they do so well. That's
right.
something that that's why you listen to the album as a whole. Like, it's something I appreciated, like, through the whole thing. It's like Mozart rock or something like that. It's like, it's a theatrical event from one song to the next, and you really don't know which song is which. And, like, if you're not looking at the track listings, then you're just listening to it. It's like, if I listened to 12 songs, I wouldn't really know if it was 6 songs or 5, you know what I mean? Like, it could have been...
They blend together.
Yeah, they blend together beautifully. I might have to pull that out. Sorry.
That's okay.
They blend together beautifully. So it's like... it's amazing because I don't understand why people hate so much on them.
Yeah, so that was...
They don't have patience, maybe.
Of course, when you asked me to pick an album, I at first didn't think of Phish because I automatically assumed, oh, that's way too like controversial and divisive, that people just wouldn't even listen to this episode. But then I went back and I thought, no, this is one of my favorite albums, and this is accomplishing everything we need to accomplish in this podcast. And hopefully it would get some people that normally wouldn't listen to Phish to check out
Check
this
it out,
album
yeah.
because it really is something for everyone. There's something for everyone in there, in my opinion.
You gotta have the thing is the thing about not being able to skip a track,
Right.
is learning patience to be
Oh,
like they're
for
gonna
sure.
their job sometimes is to lose you and to win you back. You know what I mean? Within like a comedian does that where they like piss you off then make you laugh. Like it's the same thing as an artist. Like it's not all you're not gonna always like everything I do, but my job is to do whatever I want, and then some of it's going to be something you like.
For sure, for
So
sure.
like this whole thing of like, oh, I don't like this track or I don't like this. Like, dude, the whole reason that vinyl was a thing was because you couldn't skip.
I never thought about that.
like, like you can't skip tracks. It just has to play kind of through. And
Yeah.
like it was a listening party, and people would just kind of maybe you didn't like this track, but it wasn't something that was so visceral that you hated the band.
Right,
You know what
right.
I mean? Like, oh fuck this band because they had one track that I didn't like on this. You know that doesn't happen. You know?
Yeah.
Or it used to not happen, and I wish
know.
we could go back to that.
Technology has changed things quite a bit because, like you talked about in a previous podcast, things it's turned into kind of like a singles album, like where you create an album based around one or two or three songs, and they don't really have a cohesive flow together,
Right.
which I feel is one of the most important parts of an album. Or else, you just make an EP.
Yeah. Right. That's like I was
know.
saying. Like you break it down into a couple tracks.
Yeah.
Like if you're not gonna make. Why are these songs together otherwise else? But for me, man, I really wanted to hear, because you're much well versed in Phish than I am, I really want to hear your thoughts on like that album and why it was so influential or inspiring to you. So
Yeah,
just kinda let you
totally.
take it
So,
away, dude.
all right. Yeah, so the album was recorded in 93.
Yeah. I had that release date, 93. Damn.
Yeah, which is crazy when you listen to it. I mean, for
It's
me
very
at least.
progressive. Very progressive
Yeah,
at that time.
for that time, yeah, it's way ahead of its time. So, this was probably, I don't know, maybe the third Phish album I had ever heard, and I knew it was my favorite instantly. But there are still certain songs on this album that aren't my favorite, and I will skip them, or I'll be in the mood for it that day and I'll listen to it. Who knows? So
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it to me. What I love about this album is it has so many different genre feels.
Absolutely, dude.
Like I said, the bluegrass bass line kind of thing. Then you've got kind of like a ballad. And then you've got
this
you've
almost
got like a
classical.
psychedelic.
Yeah.
Yeah, psychedelic, and then a classical,
Like the guitar
orchestral.
licks and some of that stuff is like yeah, exactly.
So-
like it's like Mozart-y almost, and you're like,
Yeah.
holy shit! Like they're playing like some really complex stuff, and the ability to them to, like we were talking about, to kind of make it feel like a flowable piece of art is wild, man. If
Yeah.
you told me that's what I had to do, I'd be like, there's no way.
Yeah.
If that was my that obviously that was their goals
Yeah.
for that album, right? Like if that was my goal for album, I would have
It would
no
take
idea.
years.
It would take exactly. I would have
Or
no idea how to accomplish
decades.
that. Yeah.
That's the genius of it.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't seem to realize. People think Phish just noodle or improvise the entire time. That is not the case. Most of the stuff you're hearing is composed.
Right.
Like a Frank Zappa. Frank
Right.
Zappa, he did guitar solos, but
Right.
I don't think he. I mean, they may have done some improvisation, but most of it he wrote out himself.
Yeah, he was a
And-
madman about like composition. Dude,
Absolutely.
for sure.
And
There's well documented how crazy he
Yeah.
was about it, dude.
Yeah.
And was sober the whole time. Like, what the fuck?
I just found that out recently, and it shook me to the bone.
Yeah,
Like,
right, dude? You're
I was like,
what?
oh my goodness.
You were
Yeah.
sober through that? Get
I
out.
mean, that either means he was just crazy, or I don't know. He got a
loved
lot
it.
done.
He
did
loved
get
it,
a lot
though.
done.
I mean, at some point there has to be, for you to do an album like Rift or anything we're talking about, there has to be a certain love for music as a whole that you want to cross boundaries of genres, right? Like it is something to say like I've never wanted to be a bluegrass mandolin player. I've fallen
Yeah.
into that quite a bit because people think that's just what the instrument does, but there's a lot of people who do like swing jazz and like a lot of different stuff in blues with the mandolin, but they don't
Right.
get a lot of like shine with for it. So I've always been jealous of people who can go, you know what? I know what you're telling me, what the genre says I'm supposed to play, but here's what I'm gonna do, and it's not necessarily gonna have a genre. Like I could play classical, I could play whatever. You know, Chris Thiele does
Yeah,
that with the mandolin.
absolutely.
Like he really doesn't define himself with any. He can
Nope.
go play bluegrass, he can go play Mozart, he can go play this, that, or the other. And you never know what you're gonna see when you get there. And I've always loved that. And Phish, like this album, listening to it, I listened to it today. It was like, oh, okay. I have had, you know, it takes a lot of patience to sit down and listen to something that you're not really like influenced by.
Especially a band that is so controversial,
right?
And that's why.
And you give all these other negative connotations from other people
Yeah,
my whole
exactly.
life, and like
Exactly.
I didn't really, dude. Honestly, I had a moment today when I was like, I see what I've been missing today.
Exactly.
Like I see exactly what I've been missing. Of why this is cool.
And it doesn't mean you have to love them or anything,
Right, you know,
but you just have to appreciate it or respect it. And not
as a musician, there's dude. I was listening to this. Both of the guitar players we're talking about today are incredible, like insane jazz, blues, rock. Like some of those shit that Trey's doing on that, I'm just like, what? Where did you come up? Like, I know you wrote this. Like, how did you think to go that direction? You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
He does like left field stuff. It's really fucking awesome. And if you're a guitar player and you listen to that and you're like, oh, that's not shit. Like, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. Like,
Yep.
it takes a dedicated musician to do anything close to that. Like, you know, and it like. The hate they get is very unwarranted, I think. You know?
Well,
it's almost like Dave Matthews, right? Like Dave Matthews
for
is
sure,
shit, dude. It's like,
for
what?
sure.
Are you
And
kidding me?
I understand the Phish hate because I have unwarranted hatreds towards bands that I'm sure I would like if I really actually sat down and listened to them, or maybe even really like. I don't know yet. But you know, it's kind of just how life is. All right, I'm opening a beer, so this may be boom.
Woo! Hell yeah, right on. I think it's one of these things, man, where like I appreciate authenticity, right? So I don't care what you do, just be authentic. And I've always said, be the same authentic person that you are, and I'll be your friend. And that's something that I find that is gonna. I love about what I'm doing right now is that like all this is just gonna help me expand my musical knowledge and maybe everybody who listens too.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, they might take a chance and go, all right, I've never listened to this band before in my life, and I've heard all this negative connotation behind it, but I'll go listen to it because these guys said these reasons. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that's what I hope.
And
to
listen
accomplish.
for it.
And listen for it, and kind of hear like, dude. There's my boss zones out and listens to Greta Van Fleet, and it's like, all right, you know, that's your thing.
That's a line I will not cross. No, I definitely have. I definitely have listened, and yeah.
That's a weird genre. Me and Riley were talking about it's just a weird genre right now.
Yeah, for sure.
But back on the Phish stuff, one of my favorite songs on that Phish album was My Friend,
Oh,
because
yeah.
in the middle, it's like the heaviest, funkiest, like,
Yep.
good Lord, dude, out of nowhere, I feel like. It's just out of
So-
nowhere. It's just like, boom, you're like, what? We're now doing this? Like,
Funny
I
you
love
said that.
shit, dude.
You want to know? So here you go. So in my friend, the lyric is, and he lights the fuse,
Mhm.
and it sounds like the guitar is going up the notes. He's like sliding up, and it's like, and it sounds like a fuse being lit, and then it explodes into exactly what you were talking about. Like,
Dude.
So it's well thought out.
Thought out, but it was just, I was actually like doing something this morning because I was kind of like just allowing myself to zone in and out of it, you know. And I was listening to that song and I was like, oh, this is cool because it has a really interesting beginning.
Yeah.
But then it turns into, and I was just out of the blue. I was like, wait, now this is a funk song? Like this is what we're doing
Yeah.
now? This is awesome! Like hell yeah,
Yeah.
dude. But it again, like it would take. I think for me personally, like it would take such a crazy person to like be like, this is what we're gonna do and do it successfully.
Oh,
you know?
I know.
Like, could you imagine going in studio to record with Trey and him being like, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
What?
So I'm not sure. I really don't know the history behind that. I'd be curious because I think a lot of the like for the beginning part, it's sort of chop meal. So like, like the beginning part is probably something Trey came up with himself, like a guitar line that he wrote, a guitar composition.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, and it starts off sounding happy.
Yeah.
And then when, the full, it turns dark really quick. And the
Like,
title of the song is My Friend, My Friend.
Yeah.
He's got a knife. So he's your friend, but he's got a knife.
Yeah, yeah.
So it going from happy to dark is kind of like the title
and then
of
they
the
laugh
song.
at the end of the track.
Yeah. That's
then they like
so
bust that laugh, and it's like, whoa, this is like some crazy.
That's
shit.
one of the things I was going to ask you about. What you thought about the endings of the songs, because the song Maze, they
that would mess me up,
end
dude.
with the circus.
Yeah,
ending.
I was like, what?
Yeah, it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. For me, dude, it's hard enough. And I've done some more complex stuff with Riley, right? Where we sat down and we've tried to write a little bit more like in-depth song or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's been so hard to it's so hard to pull that off live or record it.
Yeah.
Like to remember all the moving parts in the song, and then for them to play like
especially without computers.
Yeah, especially
or without good computers.
Yeah, exactly. And so like for them recording that, and like, all right, if they're gonna go back and I don't know that they could edit things back then like that, right?
Probably not. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Nowadays, you could probably like cut and splice and cut and splice and cut and splice.
You could do that with tape, but it was a lot more difficult.
Right. I just feel like back then they were much more like savvy with. All right, we have to like there has to be cues.
Oh yeah.
Throughout the song that they know. Okay, now we're going to this part. All right, here's the cue. Now we're going to this part, and like that's mentally you're retaining a lot of information whilst doing a task. That's not an easy thing to do.
So, one thing, so this was in 93, so by that point, they had been playing almost 10 years, and they had probably played, 200 to 300 gigs. Don't hold me to that, but that's maybe more, maybe less, but either way, they played live a lot.
Right.
So they went in writing this album, they had practiced it to the bone for sure.
Well, that's the best way to make the most of your money in a recording studio, right? So, especially if you're gonna do some crazy shit like this, like you don't have a lot of extra time.
I'm sure they came up with some things in the studio. I need to read, some of the Phish books about this, because I'm curious now how they pulled it off. It's just insane. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about it?
Yeah, for sure. Let me just see what I have here. So, okay, what did you think about the interlude? Oh, so the track list. The first song is Rift, which is got that bluegrass vibe with the really cool harmonies. The second one is Fast Enough for You, which is I find funny because it's it's like one of the only like really slow songs on the album.
Yeah, and
it's kind of satire because they're saying it isn't really fast enough for you.
Yeah.
And then
the track name versus the track. Yeah. It's a little different.
So, and just like on the album as a whole, and Phish fans as a whole want a faster song.
Right,
so
yeah.
They're like, he's making fun of it, but he ended up making a beautiful, like almost love song. And what ties this whole album together, what makes it a concept album, more than just like the songs flowing together, is it's all about. I didn't realize this until recently, but it's all about love, and there's a lot of underlying themes, but
interesting.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go back and try to pick that up. That's awesome.
So if you read the lyrics, you definitely will notice it.
It takes longer for it to sink in.
Fast Enough for You is a love song. Lengthwise comes after that, which is the interlude, where it gets real weird, and then he says, when you're there, I sleep lengthwise, and when you're gone, I sleep diagonal in my bed.
Right.
So so that's like saying, it's like, there's a symbolic meaning behind that.
Right.
Then it goes into Maze, kind of like Dark Side of the Moon does, where there's like the like ticking that bleeds into the next song, which I think is very cool.
And a homage to the past, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
to me, like a comparison to Phish, and I was almost did this, but it was a different time period. Would have been like Pink Floyd. That would have been like my
Yep.
only other like thing that I thought, other than a straight jam band, which is what I came up with. I was like, dude, probably Pink Floyd because they're so theatrical, but it's Pink Floyd is so a thing of their own. You know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
so like. They're different. They're much different. I don't know that. I feel like the musicianship of Phish is a lot more for me personally. Like
Absolutely, yeah.
those guys are world class. Not saying anything bad about Pink Floyd, but the guys in Phish are badass
Well, it's
fucking
just
musicians.
it's just it's more thought provoking. I think. Well, no, maybe that's the wrong term. It's just more modern.
Right,
is
exactly.
basically
And
it.
I didn't want to do a throwback. I didn't want to have people to feel like I was comparing like a classic album to Phish, and because that's not the case.
Right.
They're much more to me like in the jam band world, and that's where people get lose sight of them because they go to this. You have these people. You have people like yourself and everything who kind of can see like the 3D chess they're playing with the album. And then maybe you don't at first, but over time you do.
Yeah.
But like the thing is, I don't know that people take the time. They just call them a jam band, and like
No,
that's
exactly,
where that's
and
where
they
I just
automatically turn off.
yeah, it's where I just like kind of did. Even like
I do it too though with other jam bands because a lot of them I don't like.
Right.
So if that says anything,
1 second.
you're good.
We're good. Avery just makes an appearance on this episode, I think.
Well, I do want to talk about your album, and I do just
we can
have
pivot
a
in
few,
just a second.
I have a couple more things to
let's
say if
pivot
that's
right
all
after
right.
this. Absolutely.
So then there's the song Sparkle, which is like the laughing fall apart.
Yeah,
and it's just a weird silly song. It's not one of my favorites, but it just kind of throws a wedge into this album. So Phish takes themselves. Obviously, they take themselves very seriously, but at the same time, they want you to think they're not taking it seriously.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
So they throw a song in there like that.
I mean, the wedge was mine. Honestly, was one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, that comes next, right?
And the end, and the ending of that song in particular.
That is one of the. I can't even remember the ending right now.
We'll have to play it after this.
Yeah. I mean, there. Yeah. Then it goes into Way. Well, yeah, I need to pull up the track list, but it goes into Way, right?
Let me see.
After that.
Yeah, it goes into All Things Reconsidered.
Oh, All Things Reconsidered, which
Yeah.
is one of the. So I tried to learn that on guitar one time.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, you could do it. It would take you. It would take you a day or a week, depending how good you are. And it's one of the craziest like jazz, like guitar compositions I've ever heard, and I love that song. And they very rarely play it ever for a reason because
it's so hard.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So then it goes to Way, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a song by the bass player Mike Gordon, as well as Mound. But Way is also, he says, he jokes like, it has the jazz intro, and then he says, "I'd like to cut your head off so I could weigh it."
Yeah.
What do you say? So, but the knife from my friend, he's got a knife, links that together.
Okay. All right.
know?
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting little thing. And then Mound is a really cool song that Mike Gordon also wrote. And then my favorite song on the album is It's Ice. And
yeah, me too, dude. That was one of my favorite ones.
So it starts out with the crazy guitar riff.
Yes.
And then the bass line comes in, and they match up, but it's not what you would expect.
Yeah.
And he does this funky bass line.
This like syncopation on
yeah,
set,
it's
right?
a polyrhythm kind of thing.
And
which ties into your album also. I noticed some amazing polyrhythms. And so that is one of my favorite songs. And it talks about sort of like two versions of yourself where the guy is skating on ice and he sees his reflection, and his reflection is under the water. Like basically drowning, I guess. And so he says, the guy down below laughs in full light of my frown. My double wants to pull me down. So it's kind of like the dark side of your
yourself.
personality
Yeah,
wants to bring
that's an
you down
interesting way.
under the ice.
That's an interesting way to describe that. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone has kind of. Oh, I don't know. I personally have a lot of self-destructing tendencies.
for sure.
You know what I mean? And I feel like
We all,
musicians.
I think most people do, whether they
I think a lot of
know
artists
it or not.
definitely
Well,
do,
artists
right?
definitely
Like
do.
artists, 100%
Yeah.
have self-destructing tendencies, and that's a very interesting way to describe it because, like, it's to me, man. I love songwriters who are so descriptive that you're like, oh, you went through that in your
Yeah,
life,
exactly.
right? So he must
No
have skated
question.
across ice at one point in his life and
Right.
seen a reflection of himself. Like, there's a John Hartford lyric.
Or he took good drugs.
Or he took good drugs. There's a
Which
John,
he doesn't anymore.
there's
But
a John
the songs
Hartford
are still
lyric.
here.
There's a John Hartford lyric in Steamboat. He's sitting in his 747 just watching those clouds go by. Can't tell if it's sunshine or if it's rain. Now, I've experienced that, but the only reason I know what that's like is because I've been in a plane and I've flown.
Absolutely.
And he wrote that in the 70s. So it's like
Yeah.
you have had to have been in a plane and saw clouds go, I wonder if if it's sun shining or it's raining down there. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
that is the same with that lyric that you were just talking about. It was like he's had to be he had at one point ice skating and saw a reflection and had this epiphany or tied it in later to a childhood experience or something like that. You know, because like that's something that I think is so awesome about great descriptive. Andrew talked about that where he's like some writers are just journalists. They just talk about what's in front of them, and it's like, oh shit, the best writers are kind of really
painters.
Yeah, they just are painting, but they're talking about what's going on, and they talk about their real life experiences that they're the only ones that know how to describe.
Absolutely.
You know, that's an interesting lyric. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, so my thought. I mean, who knows? He could have been ice skating. But my thought was that, well, basically Phish has a lyricist a guy that the guitarist Trey knew in college. So a lot of the songs, Tom Marshall will hand Trey the lyrics. He's the lyricist, and Trey will write the music around it.
Oh,
so that's how they did, kind of like the Grateful Dead with Jerry Garcia and Robert Hunter.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing.
And Jerry just took a bunch of folk music.
So I think this was a really talented writer, and he saw a metaphor about himself.
Interesting,
with the ice skating,
right?
You know,
that is very, very true. To me,
but
it's,
I know exactly
like,
what you mean.
Whenever I read something like that, it gives me a feeling. It may just be a very talented writer, and I may just be the bait. I'm the mark, right? I'm the one who falls for it. But at the same time,
nothing wrong with that.
I don't. Yeah. I'm not a negative connotation.
You should
but
fall for it.
You should fall for it, but it makes me feel like you've experienced that thing. When I realize what you're saying, and I hear you say something so deep like that, I'm like, oh, you've done that before. That's awesome. I have another level of appreciation for it. I'm gonna pivot over here to the Gov't Mule.
Absolutely,
cool
yeah. That.
So it's my favorite album name ever, Dose.
I know, it's straight to the point.
Straight to the point, baby.
And I just figured out that the logo is. I always had seen it at the shows. It's actually 3 mule heads.
Yeah, because
it's just trippy.
This is one of their debut albums, like one of their first couple albums. And they Warren Haynes for several years was trying to get out of the shadow of the Allman Brothers, man, because he was the one that basically brought. So when the Allman Brothers in the 80s got back together, like he was the only one that Greg was like comfortable enough with playing guitar, and Dickie Betts. So like it's in his autobiography I've read several times that he was like, we tried out 1,000 guitar players, and Warren Haynes was the only one that like wasn't an asshole. Like it's basically what he said. Like and it was like, wow, okay. And so he got like Greg's stamp of approval because like you can't be in the Allman Brothers without the Allman Brother like liking you, right?
Absolutely.
So that was. I had learned of the Gov't Mule years before, but when I was about 21, that's what made me re-jump into it, was reading Greg's autobiography.
Oh, okay.
Was because I had known of them, and like I had heard some stuff, but really what made me go back into, hey, let's give Gov't Mule a chance and let's check this stuff out, was Greg being like, he's the only guitar player I wanted to play in the Allman. I'm like, holy shit, all right, cool. That's a big statement.
That does mean
and
mean
dude,
a lot.
he shreds on this fucking album, dude. And from slide guitar to like just straight,
absolutely,
like, he goes off
some
on
of
this
the
album.
best Mule, some of the best Warren Haynes guitar I've heard.
This album.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
definitely.
I completely agree.
His tone isn't my favorite, but it works
Well,
so
he's still
well.
stuck in that Allman Brothers tone, though. If you look at if I listen to some of it, man, I can hear like the '80s Allman Brothers coming out of it because he's got that like heavy reverb.
Right.
And, like,
True that. True
you know,
that.
he's still. He still knows what makes him money, and he doesn't want to like walk away from that. So he's still got that like Allman Brothers tone, but some of the stuff is like super jazzy, and he's
That's
like
true.
doing a
Yeah,
lot of
you're
different
right,
stuff.
you're
but
right,
the
you're right.
tone is so like '80s Allman Brothers. It's
Yeah.
so hard for him to get away from it, and I get it. Like I'm sure he had some producer being like, "Look, man, you know what sells our tickets, right?"
That's
like,
true. That's true. Yeah, yeah.
You should
No,
probably
so-
sound exactly like you do with the Allman Brothers.
I guess what I was saying, sort of what I meant was like there were certain songs on here where I would like at the beginning of the song, Game Face.
Oh, yeah,
I
good
liked
one.
the tone a lot, but then there was like a tone of the song that I didn't like for some reason, and it's not that I hated it. I just
Right.
I just was like, oh, that's
Interesting.
not what I
And
what
we
I
gotta
wanted
remember-
to happen.
we gotta again-
but I love it.
Well,
you
that's
know?
the whole artistic license, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's what,
exactly.
That's that we all kind of have that where we're like listening and you like something and then all of a sudden you don't like it. But what we have to remember is this was released in 1998.
Exactly.
And so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, what was this?
I
This
keep
style of
forgetting
music
that.
was dead in that time period almost. Like you had your Phish that came around, and then when Jerry Garcia died,
Yeah.
like this kind of music wasn't really big, and like honestly wasn't really big until like 2009, 10ish, like 11ish. So
Right.
they went from like a 10-year period there, or 11, 12-year period there, where they kind of weren't relevant, but we're still pumping out shit like this. Like you look at Gov't Mule's album selection, it's like 98, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2000. They're like a straight early 2000s band.
Yeah.
But like they were probably one of the only ones who struggled to stay relevant. And this was a conversation I was having with Riley. Is like, was it just that people were just listening what was on the radio, or was the record labels like fighting to get into the streaming platforms, like to own percentage of the streaming platforms?
Man.
You know what I mean? Like
That's a whole nother can of worms.
I know, right?
But,
It is a
yeah.
total whole nother can of worms, but it is a
No, but
food
no,
for thought,
it is.
right? You
no,
know?
absolutely. Yeah.
It is food for thought because I think that like Warren Haynes and Gov't Mule at any other time period than
Yeah.
when they were
Yeah.
would have like right now if Gov't Mule was around right now they would be crushing it. If
Yeah.
they were around 10 years before they would have crushed it.
Yeah.
They were just
You
in
mean
the-
like debuting now? Yeah.
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Or
like,
yeah.
they just were in a weird space.
I agree. I totally
musically,
agree.
And I don't know why more people don't kind of like because he's more famous for playing with the Allman Brothers, Greg Allman, all
That's
that stuff,
true.
You know.
What's wild is 50 years from now, when hopefully people are listening to this podcast still.
They're gonna be like, "What are you talking about?"
No, they'll think of this as Gov't Mule and the Allman Brothers as the same time,
Basically.
pretty much.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's like
There'd be
it
no
was
difference, yeah.
there was 30 years apart.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I mean that's nothing.
True.
You know what I
Very
mean?
True, dude.
So
not really, because I mean the Allman Brothers. It's not probably 25 or 26
yeah,
years
exactly.
apart. Like really and truly, like that's a young person's lifespan. Like
Yeah,
it's not very long. Yeah, you have bring up
in
a
a
good point right
century
there.
that'll be nothing.
That's
So,
nothing exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you like about what are some of the songs you
So-
liked off the album? Man?
Oh yeah, so I did
Other
want
than Game Face, you
I
brought that
wanted
up,
to
yeah?
mention that that I've seen Gov't Mule quite a few
yeah,
times, and yeah. So the first time I saw them was 2004. My stepdad took me. He knew I was starting to get into jam band music and rock, and he was a longtime Gov't Mule fan. So he took me there to the Landmark on Halloween 2004, and they played a fantastic show. And it was one of the first like real jam band shows I had seen, and it blew my mind. They were all dressed up in costumes, and it was just great, you know. And downtown Richmond, you know, so I have fond memories of that. So I will always love Gov't Mule just for that reason alone. So going into this album, I was glad you picked it because they're also not my favorite band, which I know Phish isn't your favorite band either. So I thought it would be interesting and help us both grow.
And that's the whole point of what I'm trying to do, right?
Absolutely.
We got to stop being so in our own bubbles.
No,
You know
for
what I mean?
sure.
Like, if you want to grow musically, if you're a musician and you want to get better,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen playing the same 4 songs.
Yeah,
You
for
got to
sure.
step out of your shit. You got to get good at those 4 songs that you're playing, but then you got to step out. Like, you got to, at some point,
Yeah.
learn something else, you know? And there's nothing like I was saying earlier, having to kind of shut off your ego or your opinion for a second and listening to an album, and all of a sudden you have like this epiphany like I had earlier, where it was like, oh, I see what other people have been talking about when they like this stuff. Like, you kind of get a different you get a chance to form a different
perspective.
opinion.
Yeah,
You just get a few moments if you just kind of quiet
Right.
listen. You get a chance to have a different perspective for a second. It's wild, dude.
Absolutely.
I love
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And so I want to say that I feel the same way about politics. You know, where it's like,
Yeah.
and I did for a long time until you know, things changed and things got ugly.
Right.
So music will never get ugly. Or I mean,
Right.
you know, there.
Right,
But
we kind of have a common ground
it's-
where we all agree that we like music, right? Like,
yeah,
that
exactly.
we kind of like the basis should be, if you're listening to this, it's pretty obscure at this point, so you should be pretty well known that it should be pretty well known that you're really into music if you're checking this out right now, right? So I mean, I really love Gov't Mule just because. Like, maybe Warren Haynes just had the fuck you money at the moment to be like, you know what, I'm doing this, and he just did it, and I'm so glad he did, because looking back at it, there's so much of that like Southern blues rock, but then he kind of molds it into jazz as well. Like, they take it, like you said, they take it into another realm.
Yeah.
Like, that's one thing that he does very, very good, is he's like, okay, the Allman Brothers were here, but I'm not going to stop there. I'm gonna have to be my.
He's gonna grow on it. Yeah.
He's got to expand on it. And honestly, man, I hate to compare him to this because Derek Trucks is one of the best guitar players to ever live. But to me, lineal, like, if you look at a timeline, there's your early blues guys playing, like your Mississippi Delta blues guys playing.
Right.
There's Taj Mahal, and he had Ry Cooder playing slide, and then there's Duane Allman. And after Duane Allman, the only one who's touched him like so far really is like Derek Trucks.
Yes,
but
right,
listening to
right.
albums like this, listening to the Gov't Mule albums, going back and revisiting this stuff nowadays, I can actually kind of back that up and say Warren Haynes
some
really and
pit
truly,
stops.
It was some pit stops, and Warren
Yeah.
has this like. So there's this thing that I read about Derek. He went out to India and actually learned some Eastern music because there's sitar and slide.
Exactly
and stuff.
that.
And on this particular album that we listened to, they have some of that Eastern music influence
definitely.
on this, and that was something
Threw
that
me
was
off.
like. It threw me off too. I was like, wait, I forgot that this.
In a good way.
In a good way. I forgot that they did this. And it made me realize that, like, oh, okay, there might be some very big highlights in the world of, like, whatever style of music you're talking about. But there's dudes who work their ass off as well, like Warren Haynes, that don't get the shine that they need to. Because, you know, Warren and Derek did play a lot together. So there's a lot to say that he possibly influenced Derek. You know what I mean? Like, with the Allman Brothers and stuff within the early 2000s, in that time period.
There's no way he didn't.
There's no way he didn't, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, it's funny because it's like I personally haven't given Warren enough credit until this opportunity right now, which is why I love this shit, man.
Yeah.
This is why I love this idea I've had, is because it's like, dude, I can now revisit stuff that in the past I had kind of brushed off, or maybe I had said, you know, it's not right for me right now. I don't.
Yeah.
Again, when I was talking to Andrew, there's sometimes you have to have personal or life experience before you can go back and appreciate some of this stuff, right?
Exactly.
So I've gotten.
We're older now.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just in the right point in my life to go back and revisit some of these guys and go, oh wait, you know, Derek Trucks is a bad motherfucker, but there's this guy named Warren Haynes that kind of like maybe influenced him a little bit when he got a little bit more advanced, because I can definitely hear the Eastern music influence from Warren going into Derek 100%. And this album really, really opened my eyes to that, where I was like, oh, that's a sitar. Oh, that's a, what was the instrument you said earlier?
Tabla.
Yeah, exactly. That was like so many different things where you're like, oh, this isn't Western music at all. Like, you know, like, or it is, but they don't care. And that was the connection. I'm so glad I found this album to Phish, is that like they don't care about the genre they're supposed to be in.
Right, exactly.
That doesn't matter, you know?
Yep.
So, yeah, sorry, give me a
No,
go.
for sure. Yeah, and so you're saying it's the perfect time for you now,
Hmm.
and that's the beautiful thing is this album was recorded in 1998,
Yeah,
but
I was
you can
7.
listen to it whenever it's right for you
Right,
or whatever. Which it has. I'm going to talk about it in a positive sense today
right, exactly.
because there are many positives, but and Warren Haynes already got paid for that album.
Oh yeah, dude.
He's not.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not living off of that album
No,
anymore.
no, no.
But artists nowadays, we're losing that craft
Mm.
because I mean, I don't think it's gone, at all, but it's if we keep heading the direction we're headed and there's no money there for artists to
Hmm.
be able to make a healthy living off of creating albums,
Hmm.
that's a dangerous thing.
It is a dangerous thing. I agree. I think that what scares me the most about it is I hope that there's more independent or smaller label stuff that come up and go, hey, we're just going to give the artist.
And I love that. Yeah.
There is a few things going on right now
Right.
in the space right now. But I don't have money, man. You know what I mean? Like I'm an outsider still. I'm still looking at the from the other side of the hill, going, "Damn, what are those guys doing?" Like I hope you guys are doing something good. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I have no influence on that right now. So to me, it does make me a little pessimistic because it's like,
Yeah.
I know how people with money are. They're gonna try to make more money, and these record labels, the independent ones and everything are great, but the ones with money, they're not necessarily giving a shit. Like they're not
Yeah.
gonna let an artist have his dude. Even rappers right now are having this thing where they want to like buy their masters back and all this stuff. And it's
For
like,
sure.
oh, now you guys are figuring it out, aren't you? Like you're figuring
Yeah,
out why
yeah.
nobody else did that before you guys. Like,
Yeah.
so I think that the music space in a whole has to evolve right now. Right? There's one thing that I think is the most interesting thing is the access of information and the ability for me and you to both listen for this show to happen.
Exactly.
Like, for us to be
easily.
for us to go back and
Yeah.
listening to those albums and enjoy them and experience them at a different point in your life, like you're
Yep.
saying, like all that to have that available is very, very valuable to the consumer, and I don't understand why it's not more valuable to the artist that puts it out. And I think it's going to take some probably actual government interjection to do that. Like
Yeah,
they're gonna
for
have
sure.
to pass something that says that artists get a base pay of this percentage of your revenue.
Oh,
and,
I agree.
And without that,
Yeah.
Spotify is just gonna keep going.
No, I know. Yeah, it's giving you a millionth of a cent per
Yeah,
listen.
sorry, dude. Like,
yeah, you
hope
made.
you got some ads.
I
And
mean-
did you see what Spotify's the president of Spotify said recently? He said that artists can't release music every 2 years and stay relevant. And it's like,
Oh yeah, every week.
Yeah,
It
it's like,
needs-
okay,
every
so
week.
I'm going to start a music, like, I basically have to start a podcast. This is what you're telling me. I have to start a weekly
There you go, yeah.
I have to start a weekly content thing because I
Right.
can't release music every 2 years to stay relevant. And
Yeah.
then I can release music whenever I want because I'll stay relevant with whatever weekly content I put out.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It was one
I
of
know,
those moments where literally it's probably why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. But
and
I hate it because
I get it.
I don't have any push or pull, and I'm not really in the game, so I'm just playing by the rules set, right?
Exactly.
I'm like, oh, that's the rule. We'll do that.
I think that's what most people did, to get places.
I know, but I'm worried about the mid-level artist
Oh, for sure.
who's like, dude, I just want to play music. I just want to do what I
So-
love to do, you know?
Yeah, so what I want to say about that is like, the crazy. I think everyone knows this, but with COVID, touring isn't possible,
Right.
and that's the only revenue source.
Yeah.
Now that we have Spotify, which barely pays artists.
And streaming is kind of whatever. It's not the best quality all the
Yeah.
time, you know?
So
Yeah, totally.
without touring for almost going on what,
Almost a
9
year.
months, almost a
Yeah.
year. I mean, yeah, we'll say a year at this point. That changes things a lot. And my only hope is that it pushes people harder. I hope people have been songwriting
Yeah.
just hard.
And
like-
and not like we said earlier,
and-
not just straight COVID songs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to hear an album of my COVID.
I want to hear
songs.
one good one, but
yeah, like one good one about losing your mind and pulling your hair out. I shaved my head, dude. So, you gonna
Yeah.
talk to me? I cut all my hair off. So like, I had a moment. All right, man. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I want to talk a tiny bit more about the Gov't Mule
absolutely.
dose because I feel like we
dude.
didn't focus
No, we
too
probably
much on
didn't
it.
focus that much on it. Let me go back towards it.
So, the opening.
Oh yeah,
I love the intro, Blind Man.
Yeah, we didn't talk at all. My bad. We didn't talk
No,
at
it's
all
okay.
about it.
I think this has been very fruitful. So I really love the intro to the whole album.
Yeah, Blind Man in the Dark.
It's got
cool,
like a powerful polyrhythm with like these triplets.
And the words are pretty like interesting.
Yeah.
They give you like an introspective thinking. You're like, oh yeah.
It's a very
it's
very southern like blues like imagery that I get from it that I love.
Yeah.
There's some dirty riffs in there, but one thing about this whole album that I loved is the Leslie. The Leslie. I had trouble. I think it's on Warren's guitar. But it might also be on the organ. There's a lot of organ, there's a lot of Leslie, and God, that gets me every time. Like I love it.
I mean, tone is, it's everything to that style of music. So like,
but the whirl, the whirl of the Leslie on a guitar can add so much.
If you know what you're doing with it, right? Like,
right, exactly. No, it's an art.
That's the beautiful part of
it's an art,
Warren
just
Haynes.
like anything else.
The one thing that I forgot to talk about, is the mandolin. And
yes, that song was amazing.
Like, I don't know why I forgot to talk about that.
No, it's okay.
I have it written down right here. Raven Black. Isn't that what's the name?
Raven Black Knight.
Yeah, Raven Black Knight. That's right. Yeah. That song was the reason I knew of Gov't Mule from the beginning.
That's insane to me.
I can't remember who told me.
Because it's the weirdest Gov't Mule song I've
weirdest
ever
Gov't
heard.
Mule song.
It has like an Irish vibe with like Eastern.
And it has the like electric mandolin playing in it the whole time, which is like unless you know what a mandolin, like unless you've played an electric mandolin, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what that sounds like.
I didn't notice that's what it was because I was so distracted by the tabla and everything else. But when we just listened to it for a second, I totally picked it up.
And that was the thing, because when I was coming up, I was just so against traditional learning of any instrument. So, of course, everyone told me to learn bluegrass, and I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. And I came across this one hippie somewhere. I can't remember who it was, or I really want to say it was a bass player I used to play with. I won't call his name out because
that's cool.
Why. But but I swear he put me on to this, and he was like, hey, man, check this out. They have a mandolin on it, and it's not what you're thinking. And I listened to it, and at that time, I was like, what is this? Yeah. And I just remember my thing of Gov't Mule was like, oh, this is some crazy music. And I'm also like 15, 16 years old at the time, too. So I just didn't understand what I was listening to. And then, again, about 7 or 8 years ago, I revisited Gov't Mule and got really heavy into them because of just Warren Haynes is a killer guitar player. Yeah. But this track is so funny to me that that's pretty much the reason why I picked this album. Is because I knew that it was weird. I knew that it was off the beaten path. I knew that it was also like really heavy with jazz theory as well. I knew all those things were there. And I'm not trying to compare artists on any type of like negative connotation, but I do want to look. If somebody was to say, okay, I'm going to listen to both of these albums back to back, they would see some similarities. I feel like, right?
Absolutely.
And that's kind of my purpose has always been with a couple of episodes I've done now is that I don't want to pull up anything comparing anybody. Like comparison is the death of art, really, to me. Like that's why competition sucks. When I compete, I do that. It sucks. It makes you like. It makes music not fun, really and truly. Yeah. So I don't want it to go to that level, you know what I mean? But I do want it to be a thing where you can listen to both of these albums congruently and be like, oh, that was an interesting experience. I listened to Phish and then Warren Haynes and then or Gov't Mule or whatever. Like, I feel like they do have some similarities in that aspect, but
for sure.
And I love jam bands in a whole. Again, I'm an Allman Brothers nut. Like I grew up listening. My dad had the Allman Brothers Dreams box set. Yeah, and that was just like I used to sleep listening to the anthology, the Dwayne Allman anthology.
You used to fall asleep to it.
Yeah, because I thought
that's amazing.
I was an idiot because I thought that I would.
Oh, you thought you'd absorb it?
Yeah, and then wait,
dude.
You kind of do that.
You did.
You kind of do.
You did. I mean,
right? You like the some of the stuff that I.
At least
you
love it.
I love it, and some of the things that when I play some of the breaks or some of the leads or some of the phrases. That's really what I'm trying to go for. Some of the phrases I go for are kind of just embedded in my brain from the music that I grew up listening to. So at some level, it kind of did
Yeah,
work.
there you go.
But yeah, when I was 15, I just assumed I'd wake up and play like Jimi Hendrix or whatever. But
Yeah.
awesome. Well, man, I honestly,
Are we over time?
no.
Okay. I got a couple
dude,
more things.
Yeah, do it. Shoot.
So, Thorazine Shuffle is the second song.
That is the second song. That
So,
is crazy.
That's the only song I knew previous off of this. And
Yeah?
I've seen 10 Gov't Mule shows, maybe more. And, I have heard these songs, I'm sure. But I had never listened to the album. So when I heard Thorazine Shuffle on the album, I was like, oh, man, this is great. And there's also that great bass documentary after the bass player died. Alan Woody, I believe his name is. So Warren Haynes got all of the best bass players in the world to come and play a concert in tribute to this guy. And so they did all Gov't Mule songs, and they had Victor Wooten, Mike Gordon, John Entwistle, trying to think of the other guys, but Thorazine Shuffle is on there.
Yeah.
And that is Les Claypool's on there.
Claypool, nice.
But there's some really it's great. And it so that was the most I had watched that DVD. I think it's called Lower End. I might be wrong about that, but look up Gov't Mule bass, video, and you'll find it. But yeah, I thought Thorazine Shuffle is the coolest song.
It is pretty nuts.
It's cool because it's talking about this insane sedative that they give to schizophrenics, Thorazine, the Thorazine Shuffle.
Oh, dude.
And, so
I didn't realize that. No.
Yeah, that's
that's
so,
what it's talking about.
Yeah, and if you listen to the song, you can kind of feel it. You can feel that sedative nature of
definitely,
it.
Definitely.
And then I've got She Said, She Said.
She Said, She Said. Yeah, dude.
So
that's another one that's killer.
I had to check to make sure I wasn't listening to Black Crowes. And I'm not sure who was before, but no, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a positive way.
I can kind of see it though.
But as soon as Warren starts singing, you're like, oh, this isn't Black Crowes.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, and that's all I got on that. I love it. I love it.
Dude, hell yeah. Well, I 100% appreciate. You're one of the musicians who reached out to me and was like, dude, this is really cool what you're doing. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Dude,
this was awesome.
Absolutely.
It's really, hopefully everyone takes the time and kind of has some patience and listens to both of these albums and kind of expands their thinking on both of what we're talking about, man. You can be like myself, like you said, go into this experience and not necessarily dig what you're listening to, and then kind of see a reason why, kind of empathize with other people. You know what I mean?
And it's beneficial.
It's beneficial as hell, man, because then you start to expand. It's like drinking beer or anything else. It takes a while to get your palate used to it.
It's coming to peace with.
Yeah, and it takes a while to get your palate used to it. But once you get used to it, it's a very enjoyable experience.
And if you still hate it, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Nothing wrong with that either.
But at least you gave it a try.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's nothing harmful about that.
Exactly. Well, look, Max, I love you, dude. Thank you so much.
I love you too, DJ. Thanks for having me, bro.
Absolutely.